welcome back to our Basement Bible Study. This week we're going to be discussing the opening of the first chapter of the Gospel of John. As we discussed a little last week, John is writing to two groups who seem to lack clarity on the nature of Jesus. On the one hand, we have the Hellenistic or Greek Jews who are struggling with the idea that Jesus is fully human as well as fully divine. And on the other hand, the dispersion Jews, those who would have been under the persecution of the test benediction, would have struggled with the idea that Jesus is fully divine in addition to being human. As a result of this, what you're going to see in the opening of John's Gospel is that he leaves really no gray area to this point. John makes very clear that what he is claiming for Jesus is that he is both fully divine and fully human. John leaves no middle ground on what he intends to relay to the reader. So let's begin by looking at chapter 1, verses 1 through 5 today, or this evening. Here we go. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now that's a fairly short section, but there's a lot of things going on in these verses that are really important to John's point. You'll notice he starts out with the words "in the beginning," which of course are the first three words of Genesis. He's trying to tie these two things together deliberately to express the eternal nature of Christ. Christ is not a created being. Christ has always existed. And I think this is an important point. It can be easy sometimes to think that Christ only began to exist roughly 2,000 years ago when our New Testament begins. But in truth, as part of the triune God, Christ has existed for all time. The next point is John's referral to Christ as the Word. Now this would have significance to both of the groups that he's targeting, both the dispersion Jews and the Hellenistic Jews. And really to all Jews would have understood this referral to Christ as the Word. In these cultures, referring to God as the Word would have been commonplace. And so by referring to Jesus as the Word, John is making the very clear claim that Jesus is indeed God. This is equivalent to the I am statements of Christ that we see throughout the Gospels. By naming himself I am, Jesus makes the same unequivocal claim of his own divinity. So too would this reference of the Word be meaningful to the Greeks. In their own culture, the Word would have referred to that being that represented the ultimate reason and rationale for the universe, namely God. So use of this word is really quite deliberate and has a very clear meaning to the reader. We also see John making frequent use of the words light and life to describe Jesus. Now this certainly connects with the advent of light in Genesis and its life-bringing effects. John wants the reader to understand that he is saying that Jesus is the light of the world and that life would not exist without it. Jesus is literally the source of all life. And through Jesus and his eternal nature, we can find eternal life. So in these opening verses, John is leaving the reader no doubt about his claims, namely that Christ is God, Christ has always existed, no creation could be without Christ, life is brought into the world through Christ, and Christ is the light for all mankind. I think there is an unstated thought here as well, and keep in mind that this is not explicitly stated, it is simply something I read into it. This is my opinion. But like sunlight, all are able to bask in its glory. It doesn't run out. And so I think the use of the light analogy also gives us the realization that the light is available to all. It's not intended for just a certain select few people. Now this is pretty short this week, but this is actually a pretty convenient place to wrap up for the week. Next we're going to begin to look into the beginning of Christ's earthly ministry, starting with John the Baptist. And that's a little bit too much to adequately cover in addition to this before you folks start to not pay attention to my ramblings anymore. So I'm going to cut it off there and just say thank you for joining us, or joining me, And I hope to see you next week as we continue through our study. Until then, stay safe. Thanks.